I wasn't supposed to talk about this job. The contract made that clear. When I got the offer, it felt too good to be true. $95,000 a year, full benefits, and no prior experience required. All I had to do was pass a background check and agree to a strict NDA. My mother was skeptical. "No one pays that kind of money for easy work, Nate," she warned. I shrugged it off. I wasn't in a position to be picky. I'd been jumping from job to job since dropping out of college. Warehouse gigs, security shifts, even a short stint at a call center. Nothing stuck. So when I saw the job listing for a government research assistant that required organizational skills and attention to detail, I applied on a whim. I didn't expect a response. But 2 weeks later, a black sedan showed up outside my apartment. The first thing I noticed was how far away from everything it was. They didn't tell me where we were going. My phone was confiscated the moment I got in the car, and the windows were tinted too dark to see through. After about 2 hours, the car slowed, and we passed through a massive, gated entrance. When I finally stepped out, all I saw was a single, gray building in the middle of a desert. No windows, no signs, just a plain, rectangular structure with a security booth and cameras mounted on every corner. A tall man in a lab coat stood by the entrance. "Dr. Hensley," he introduced himself. "Welcome to Site 13, he said, handing me a small silver badge. "First rule and ever take this off." I turned it over in my hand. It was heavier than I expected, with a strange engraving on the back. "Why?" I asked. Hensley didn't answer. Inside, the facility was cold, sterile, and quiet. Everything was shades of gray walls, floors, furniture. The only color came from the occasional red warning sign. I was led through a series of security checkpoints, where I had to scan my new badge at every door. As we walked, I noticed something odd. Everyone else was wearing the same badge. Some clipped to their coats, others tucked under their shirts, like a necklace. After a few minutes, Hensley stopped and turned to face me. "I need you to understand something, Nate." I nodded. "That badge is the most important thing in this facility. If you lose it, tell someone immediately." "It's just an ID, right?" I asked. "Number." His tone was firm. "It's for your protection." I wanted to ask more, but he was already walking again. My first real job assignment was basic data entry, logging lab reports, organizing files. Pretty dull, all things considered. On my way to the main server room, I passed a hallway with numbered doors: Lab 1, Lab 2, Lab 3. Each had a small window, but the glass was tinted too dark to see through. Then I noticed Lab 5. The door was different, thicker, reinforced. Unlike the others, it had no window, just a huge industrial-grade lock. Someone had scratched a warning into the wall beside it. "Do not open." I paused, staring at the deep grooves in the paint. A voice behind me made me jump. "You knew?" I turned to see a woman about my age, arms crossed over her lab coat. "Maya." "Yeah," I said, glancing back at the door. "What's in there?" Maya's expression darkened. "Nothing you need to worry about," she said. "Just don't touch it." She walked off before I could ask anything else. I didn't question the badge rule at first. I kept it clipped to my shirt, like everyone else. I even double-checked before bed, just in case. Then, about a week in, I was in the restroom when it happened. I was washing my hands when I glanced in the mirror and saw a small silver rectangle on the counter behind me. My badge. I hadn't taken it off. My stomach dropped. I turned, grabbed it, and clipped it back onto my shirt as fast as I could. Nothing happened. At first. That night, I woke up to a sound. A click. Like a door unlocking. I sat up in bed. The dorm room was dark, but I could hear something shifting in the hall outside. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Then, just outside my door, a pause. I held my breath. The handle twitched. I wanted to call out, but my throat felt tight. Then, after a few seconds, the footsteps moved on. I barely slept after that. The next morning, I told Tanner, one of the older lab assistants. I kept my voice low. Something was outside my room last night. Tanner didn't look surprised. He just nodded at my badge. You lost it, didn't you? Only for a second. He exhaled through his nose. You were lucky. I frowned. Lucky how? Tanner looked like he wanted to say something, and he just shook his head. Just don't lose it again. I didn't ask anything else. But that night, when I got into bed, I made damn sure my badge was still clipped to my shirt. I didn't want to find out what happened if I lost it twice. I kept my badge on me at all times after that night. I didn't care if I was showering, sleeping, or changing clothes, it stayed clipped to my shirt. No exceptions. I still didn't know why it was so important, but I didn't need to. That night convinced me. But the badge wasn't the only rule in this place. And I was about to learn the second one. It happened during my second week. I was in the break room, drinking coffee and going over a stack of old reports when the lights flickered. I glanced up. The overhead fluorescence buzzed, dimmed, and for a split second, the entire room went black. Then the emergency lights kicked in. Everything was bathed in red. It was subtle at first. The air felt thicker, almost charged, like the whole building was holding its breath. Then I noticed something else. The hall outside was dead silent. Normally, you could hear distant voices, footsteps, doors opening and closing. But now, nothing. I got up, stepped into the hall, and immediately knew something was wrong. The corridors were completely empty. Then I heard it, a sharp, rhythmic clicking in the distance. A door opened down the hall, and Maya appeared. She spotted me immediately. Her expression darkened. Why the hell are you out here? I blinked. What? She grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward an open office. Come on, now. I tried to ask what was going on, but she slammed the door shut before I could get the words out. The room was pitch black, except for the red glow from the emergency lights in the hall. I turned to her. What? Be quiet, she hissed. Then she pointed to the floor. I looked down and saw a thin strip of red light leaking in from under the door. The clicking sound was getting closer. We stood there, barely breathing. It was right outside now. The clicking stopped. I felt it before I heard Ida presence. Not a person. Something else. The doorknob twitched. Maya squeezed her eyes shut. I did the same. For a moment, it felt like the whole room was watching us. Then, silence. I cracked my eyes open. The red light under the door flickered. Then, just like that, the fluorescence flickered back on. The red light was gone. Maya let out a slow breath. Jesus, Nate. I swallowed hard. What the hell was that? She didn't answer right away. She just rubbed her temples, like she was debating how much to tell me. Finally, she spoke. Rule 2. If the red lights come on, don't move. Don't make a sound. And for the love of God, don't look outside. I just stared at her. Why? I asked. She shook her head. Doesn't matter. I waited for more. Some kind of explanation. Even a lie. But she just opened the door and walked out like nothing had happened. Like this was normal. Like this was just part of the job. And maybe, for them, it was. I didn't see Tanner until later that night. We were in the dorms, getting ready for bed, when I finally asked him, "What happens if you look?" He paused, pulling his blanket over himself. "You don't want to know." I frowned. "Come on, just tell me." Tanner sighed. "The last guy who did?" He hesitated, then shook his head. Didn't last long after that. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "What do you mean?" Tanner didn't answer. He just reached over, turned off his bedside lamp, and muttered, "Keep your damn eyes shut next time." I laid awake for hours after that, wondering, because I didn't just want to know what happened if you looked. I wanted to know what the hell they were hiding from us. After the red light incident, I started paying closer attention to everything. The way people avoided certain hallways. The way they never spoke about past employees. The way everyone followed the rules without question, even the ridiculous ones. Something wasn't right in this place, and I was starting to think that none of us were supposed to leave. It was 3 weeks in when I got assigned to storage duty. Maya handed me a clipboard and pointed to the supply list. Stockroom's down on B3. Just sign off on the inventory. I nodded, taking the list. Got it. I'd been to B1 and B2 before, standard supply rooms, maintenance areas, nothing weird. But this was the first time I'd heard of B3. When I stepped onto the elevator, I noticed something odd. The B3 button was scratched up as if someone had tried to pry it off. I hesitated, then pressed it. The doors slid shut. The elevator lurched downward. And for the first time since I got here, I had the unsettling feeling that I was going somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. The doors opened with a dull ding. The hallway was silent. Not just quiet, dead silent. No hum of ventilation, no flickering lights, no distant voices. Just me and the empty corridor. I stepped out, glancing down at the clipboard. The list said storage was to the left, but at the end of the right hallway, I saw something else. A heavy steel door, with a massive chain wrapped around the handles. A rusted padlock dangled from the chains. I wasn't sure why, but I felt something deep in my gut tell me to turn around and leave. That's when I noticed the footsteps. Not mine. Someone or something was moving down here. I turned my head, scanning the hall. Nothing. Then the overhead light flickered. And for the briefest moment, just before it buzzed back on, I swore I saw a shadow move across the end of the hall. I spun around and nearly ran straight into Gene. His face was grim. "What the hell are you doing down here?" His voice was sharp, low. I held up the clipboard. Storage duty. Maya sent me. Gene didn't look at the clipboard. His eyes stayed on the chained door. He exhaled slowly. "You didn't touch it, did you?" I shook my head. His shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good." I frowned. "What's behind that door?" Gene was quiet for a long time. Then he muttered, "Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to." Gene walked me back to the stockroom and stood there as I took inventory. When I finished, he escorted me to the elevator. "You don't have clearance for B3, he said. "Stay on your assigned floors from now on." The elevator doors slid shut before I could respond. And as I rode back up, I knew one thing for certain. There were secrets in this facility. And I was going to find out exactly what they were hiding. I did what Gene said. For a while, I stayed on my assigned floors. I followed the rules. I didn't ask questions. But B3 didn't leave my mind. Especially that chained door. And when I finally saw what was on the security footage, I knew I wasn't the only one who'd been down there. It started with a simple favor. Tanner had pulled the short straw and got assigned overnight security duty. His job was to monitor the cameras and make sure nothing unusual happened. He wasn't thrilled about it. "Boring as hell," he muttered, kicking back in the chair. "Just watching empty hallways for 6 hours?" I leaned against the desk. "I'll keep you company." He raised an eyebrow. "Thought you worked mornings." I shrugged. Couldn't sleep. That was true. Lately, I'd been having weird dreams. Dreams about red lights, chained doors, footsteps in the dark. And I was tired of pretending none of this was real. The first few hours were uneventful. We watched grainy footage of empty hallways, dimly lit labs, and quiet workstations. Then, sometime past 2 a.m., Tanner stiffened. "What the hell?" I turned to the monitor. Camera feed B3 restricted storage. Someone was standing in the hallway. I leaned in. The figure was facing the chain door, standing completely still. Something about him felt off. I couldn't see his face. His head was tilted slightly downward, his shoulders rigid. "Who the hell is that?" I whispered. Tanner clicked the radio. Maya, we got movement on B3. A second of static. Then her voice groggy. B3? No one should be down there. Well, someone is, Maya cursed. I'll send someone. We kept watching. The figure didn't move, didn't fidget, didn't step forward or back, just stood there. Then he turned, and I swear to God, he was looking straight into the camera. Tanner swore under his breath. What the? Then the screen glitched. A second of static. When the feed returned, the hallway was empty. The guy was gone. Tanner clicked the radio again. Maya, he's gone. Gone? What do you mean? I mean 1 second he was there. The next there wasn't. Maya hesitated. Lock it down. No one leaves until we check the footage. Tanner nodded, reaching for the playback. But before he could rewind, the screen cut to black. The alarms went off at the same time the lights flickered red. A distant siren wailed through the building. Tanner froze. No way! Then the speakers crackled to life. Maya's voice came through sharp, urgent. Lock the doors. Stay inside. Do not. The transmission cut out. Then we heard it. Footsteps. Coming down the hall. Tanner killed the lights, grabbed my arm, and yanked me down behind the desk. We sat there, barely breathing, as the footsteps grew closer. Closer. Then, they stopped. Right outside the door. Tanner's grip tightened on my sleeve. I felt my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. Then the handle jiggled. Whoever was out there, they were trying to get in. The door handle stopped moving. Tanner and I sat frozen behind the desk, barely breathing. The security room was dead silent. Then, a knock. Soft, measured, 3 slow taps. Tanner tightened his grip on my arm. Another knock. Then the footsteps started again. This time, moving away. We waited until the sound disappeared down the hall, until we were sure whoever or whatever had been there was gone. Then finally, Tanner exhaled. We need to get to Maya. I nodded. And Jean. We hurried through the dimly lit corridors, avoiding the main hallways. The red emergency lights still flickered overhead, giving the place an eerie glow. When we reached the security checkpoint, Maya was already there along with Jean. She looked pissed. You were in the security room? We saw something on B3, Tanner said quickly. A man, watching the chain door. Jean's face didn't change. Maya glanced at him, then back at us. You need to forget about B3. I frowned. How the hell are we supposed to forget that? She exhaled sharply. Because it's not your job to know. I opened my mouth to argue, but Jean cut in. Just tell them. Maya hesitated, then turned to me and Tanner. B3 isn't storage. She leaned in slightly. It's containment. Tanner and I exchanged a glance. Containment for what? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed a file from the desk and tossed it down in front of us. The label read, Former Employees. I flipped through the pages. Dozens of names, profiles, employee records. Then I realized none of these people still worked here. Tanner's eyes widened. Are these all? Jean nodded grimly. Disappeared. Resigned. Some just never left. I swallowed hard. And the guy on B3? Maya exhaled. We don't know. I stared at her. What do you mean you don't know? Jean's voice was quiet. We never saw his face. I felt a chill creep up my spine. Maya closed the file. Listened to me carefully. Her expression darkened. You want to stay alive here? Then follow the last rule. She leaned in, lowering her voice. If you ever hear someone knocking, don't answer the door. I should have left after that. I should have packed up and quit the moment my contract was up. But I didn't. I stayed. Because even after everything, I still wanted to know the truth. And some nights, when the halls are empty and the lights flicker red, I swear I still hear it. A slow, measured knock. 3 taps. Coming from a door that should be locked. And every time I stay completely still, because I know one thing for sure. Whatever's knocking isn't human. And I'm not going to be the one who opens that door.